Stepmom said real kids only at Thanksgiving, so I stood up and revealed the truth. My fork was halfway to my mouth when Valerie smiled across the table and said, in that bright hostess voice she saves for company, "Okay, real kids only at this table." She didn't even glance at me when she said it, like I wasn't a person she was excluding, just an item she was moving out of the way. The turkey smell suddenly made my stomach turn. I could hear the soft scrape of chair legs as everyone instinctively shifted their posture, pretending they hadn't heard it. My dad's jaw tightened, but he kept carving like his hands could stay busy enough to keep his brain from catching up. Valerie's son, Dylan, looked up from his mashed potatoes with that confused, wary expression teenagers get when adults are about to do something weird. Her daughter, Paige, stared at her plate, eyes fixed, shoulders raised like she was bracing for impact. Valerie finally flicked her gaze toward me, quick, clinical, and added, "You can sit at the island, Miriam. There's plenty of space. You're not a child anymore." Like that was the reason. Like it was about logistics and not about blood. It was a Thursday in late November, the kind of Sydney heat that makes the air feel thick even inside, and Dad had insisted on hosting Thanksgiving for the first time since he married Valerie. We're not American, but my dad's work is full of American clients, and somewhere along the way he decided Thanksgiving was a nice tradition and also, I think, a way to show Valerie off. The house smelled like rosemary and butter and the lemon cleaner Valerie uses when she's stress cleaning. The dining table was set with the good plates we only used when my grandmother was alive. There were name cards. There were folded napkins. Valerie had even put little candles down the center, which I noticed because one of them was tilted like it had been set down in a hurry, one small imperfection in a room that otherwise screamed control. My dad and I used to be a two-person team. It was never perfect, but it was ours. Mum left when I was 10. She didn't die, she just left, and that's its own mess I won't get into, but Dad raised me the best he could. He was the parent who sat at my school assemblies even when he had meetings. He was the one who kept my favorite cereal in the cupboard even after I grew out of it. When I got older, it became more complicated because the same dad who would drive across town to bring me my forgotten homework would also shut down any conversation that made him uncomfortable. He hated conflict the way some people hate spiders. He'd freeze, then pretend it wasn't there. Valerie came into our lives when I was 16. She was polished, pretty in a sharp way, and she carried herself like she'd been trained to never look uncertain. She had 2 kids from her first marriage. Dad fell hard and fast. I didn't blame him for wanting someone. I just didn't expect someone to spend the next 8 years making it clear that I was a leftover piece from his previous life. She never did it in obvious movie villain ways. It was tiny things that stacked up until they felt like a wall. My bedroom became the guest room the first time her parents visited. My photos disappeared from the hallway because the frames didn't match. She'd buy Dylan and Paige new clothes for school and tell me, "You're old enough to handle your own." When Dad tried to include me, suggest a family movie night, ask if I wanted to come to something, Valerie would look at him and say, "Don't infantilize her. She needs independence." And Dad would nod like it was reasonable, like he wasn't being coached. By the time I was 24, I'd moved out, finished uni, and was trying to build a normal adult relationship with my dad that didn't feel like I was fighting for a seat at the table. I came over for Sunday lunches. I did the polite thing. I thanked Valerie for the meal. I asked Dylan about school, and Paige about her art. I kept my opinions soft and my tone friendly because I wanted peace. I wanted Dad. I told myself that if I just didn't give Valerie a reason to see me as a threat, we'd eventually settle into something tolerable. But a few months before that Thanksgiving, I'd found out the thing nobody was supposed to say out loud. And it changed the way I heard every little comment Valerie made. It happened by accident. Dad asked me to help him set up a new laptop because he couldn't get the email thing to work. He was stressed, snappy in that way he gets when he feels out of his depth, and Valerie was in the kitchen banging cabinet doors like she was punishing them. I sat at the desk in Dad's study and logged into his email to transfer things. A subject line popped up that made my eyes snag. Confidential. Results attached. It was from a clinic I recognized because I'd seen their logo on a pamphlet once at my GP. I didn't click it at first. I told myself not to be nosy. Then another email came through from a solicitor with the words family law in the preview. My stomach did that slow, sick drop like when you miss a stare. I clicked. I shouldn't have, but I did. There was a PDF attached. I opened it, and my eyes skimmed too fast to absorb anything, then landed on the part that made everything in the room go quiet. Paternity probability, 0%. Under that, two names I didn't expect, Dylan's and Paige's. Not Dad's name. Not father. Just the implication sitting there like a blunt object. I remember sitting back in the chair so hard it rolled slightly. My hands went cold. I actually checked the top of the PDF again because my brain tried to reject it. I'd always assumed Dad had adopted them legally or something, that blended family meant what it sounded like. But this wasn't about paperwork. This was biology. And Dad had been paying child support like expenses, school fees, everything for kids who weren't his. And Valerie had been acting like I was the outsider. I didn't confront him right then. I couldn't. I closed the laptop, fixed the email issue like a robot, and went home with my body buzzing like I'd been electrocuted. A week later, Dad showed up at my apartment looking like he'd aged 5 years. He sat on my couch, hands clasped so tight his knuckles were pale, and said, I need to tell you something, and I need you not to hate me. I didn't say anything because my throat wouldn't cooperate. He told me, in broken pieces, that he found out 2 years into the marriage. Valerie had kept things complicated with her ex. There were timelines that didn't add up. There was a test. There were tears. There were promises. Dad said he stayed because he loved her, because he loved the kids by then, because leaving would mean losing everything, his house, his marriage, his sense of being a man who could keep his family together. He said he felt stupid. He said he felt trapped. He said, please don't look at me differently. And the part that burned the most wasn't even the lie. It was the fact that after all that, Valerie still treated me like I wasn't real enough. So back to Thanksgiving. Back to that table. Back to Valerie's real kids only, like it was a cute little joke. I could feel my face getting hot, and it wasn't just embarrassment. It was the sharp, clean anger that made everything suddenly very clear. My chair felt too small under me. The room sounded muffled, like my ears were underwater. I looked at my dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His hand kept moving the carving knife through the turkey, sawing a little too hard. His throat bobbed when he swallowed. Valerie reached for the gravy boat and nudged it toward Dylan, like she was smoothing over a minor, awkward moment. Here you go, love, she said. Then, to me again, without a hint of shame. Miriam, grab a plate from the cupboard if you're going to sit over there. Something in me stood up before my body did. I pushed my chair back, slow at first, then it caught on the rug and jerked, making that loud scrape that makes every conversation stop. Everyone looked at me. My dad, my cousins, Valerie's kids, Valerie's sister, who'd been posting photos of the table settings. The candlelight flickered, and I remember noticing how Valerie's smile stayed in place like it was glued there. What? Valerie said, still smiling. Why are you making it dramatic? My hands were shaking, but my voice came out steadier than I expected. You just said real kids only, I said. So, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. My dad's eyes snapped to mine, warning and pleading all at once. Miriam, he said quietly, like he could pull me back with my name. Valerie's smile tightened. Don't do this. I turned to Dylan and Paige first because they were right there, because I could see Paige's fingers twisting her napkin like she wanted to disappear. This isn't about you two, I said, and my voice softened for half a second. I'm not blaming you for anything. Valerie's head tilted. Excuse me? I looked back at Valerie. You don't get to decide who's real in this house, I said. Not when you've spent years acting like I'm a guest while you play perfect family. Her eyes flashed. You are not a child, Miriam. Stop acting like... Like what? I cut in. Like I want basic respect? My throat burned, but I kept going because if I stopped, I'd crumble. I nodded toward my dad, who had finally put the knife down and was gripping the edge of the table. You want real? Okay. My dad said my name again, sharper this time. Don't. The room felt so still I could hear the air conditioner click on. I could hear someone's fork clink gently against a plate because their hand trembled. Valerie's eyes went wide, not with surprise but with calculation, like she was trying to predict what I knew. Miriam, she said, suddenly syrupy. This is not the time. I swallowed, and I tasted salt because I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. 2 years into your marriage, I said, looking directly at her. Dad found out Dylan and Paige aren't biologically his. Paige made a small sound, more breath than noise, and her eyes snapped to her mum's face. Dylan's eyebrows drew together like he didn't understand the sentence yet, but could feel it was bad. Valerie's face went blank. It wasn't anger first. It was like the mask dropped, and there was nothing underneath for a second. Then she recovered, fast. How dare you, she snapped, and her voice finally lost the hostess warmth. That is private. You made it public when you decided I wasn't real enough to sit at the table, I said. My voice shook now, but I didn't back down. You don't get to use that word like a weapon. My dad stood up, so quickly his chair toppled slightly behind him. Stop, he said, and his voice cracked. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at Valerie. Stop calling her not real. Stop acting like she's an inconvenience in her own family. Valerie's nostrils flared. So you're siding with her? She hissed, like my dad was a traitor for acknowledging me. He stared at her for a long moment, eyes glassy and exhausted. I'm siding with the truth, he said quietly. And I'm tired. Dylan pushed his plate away from him like he'd suddenly lost his appetite. Mom, he said, and it wasn't accusatory. It was confused, hurt. Like he was looking for something solid to hold on to and finding air. Paige's eyes filled, and she blinked hard like she refused to cry at the table. She looked at my dad, then at Valerie, then down at her hands. Is that why you always? She started, then stopped, like she didn't even know how to finish the thought. Valerie's face twisted. I did everything for you, she said to my dad, then to her kids, voice rising. Everything. We are a family. We have been a family. This is disgusting. My cousin's husband cleared his throat like he wanted to vanish into his chair. Someone's phone buzzed on the counter, and nobody moved to silence it. My dad's shoulders slumped, like the fight had been leaving him for years and he'd been holding it in place out of stubbornness. A family doesn't make one member eat at the island like a stranger, he said. A family doesn't rewrite reality to suit your ego. Valerie looked like she might throw the gravy boat. Instead, she turned to me with venom. You did this because you're jealous, she spat. You've always been jealous. I almost laughed, but it came out like a shaky breath. Jealous of sleeping on the edge of your life? I said. Jealous of being tolerated? I reached for my bag, which I'd left by the chair. My hands were still trembling, and I had to try twice to get the strap over my shoulder. I looked at Paige and Dylan again. Paige's eyes met mine for a second, wet, guarded, terrified. And I wished I could rewind time just for them. Dylan stared at the table like he was trying to find the point where his life split. I'm sorry, I said to them, and I meant it. You didn't ask for this. Then I looked at my dad. He looked wrecked, but there was something in his face I hadn't seen in years. Resolve. Like he'd finally stepped into the role he'd avoided. I'm not leaving because I hate you, I told him quietly. I'm leaving because I'm done being treated like I'm optional. He nodded once, swallowing hard. I know, he said. I walked out of the house with my heart thudding so hard it made my hands numb. Outside, the air was warm and smelled like cut grass and someone's barbecue down the street. I sat in my car for a full minute before turning the key, staring at my own reflection in the rearview mirror, mascara threatening but not falling. My phone buzzed almost immediately, Dad, then a message from Paige that just said, Is it true? I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to be the person who detonated their world. I also couldn't put the lie back in the box. That night, Dad called me later and said, I should have protected you better. His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. I didn't forgive him in one neat moment. I just listened. I told him, I don't know what happens next. And he said, neither do I. But I'm not letting you be pushed out anymore. I don't know how their marriage will survive this. Maybe it won't. I know Dylan and Paige will need time and support and probably therapy because adult secrets always land on kids like falling furniture. I know Valerie will tell everyone her version, where I'm the villain. And I know I'll still have days where I feel sick about saying it out loud. But I also know this. The word real doesn't belong to Valerie. It never did. Thanks for watching. If you've ever had a family member draw a line and call you less than, tell me your story in the comments. I read them, and I know how much it helps not to feel alone.